Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mukul.
It's really apt that we are meeting today to talk about your book because this week's edition of The Economist has a cover story titled Africa Rising.
Yes.
And your book actually begins with a success story from Rwanda. I wonder if we could start by talking about how did that success story come about and what lessons can other African countries learn from Rwanda's experience?
I think that when people think of Rwanda, they all go back to 1994 when the genocide happened and 1 million people actually lost their lives. I think what's really amazing to note is how much Rwanda has transformed since. You're talking about a country where the GDP has more than doubled. You're talking about growth that is every year around 7 to 8%. You're talking about agriculture as a share of GDP, which is decreasing, which means that sectors like tourism and services are growing. And all of that, I believe, is because of the type of entrepreneurial leadership that Rwanda has managed under President Kagame to really put in place in the country, which has created the conditions for people to want to actually go and invest and for entrepreneurs to really thrive.
So when one thinks about Africa, one remembers, the famous book written by the late C.K. Prahalad, talking about the bottom of the pyramid.
Yes.
Which is also a very important theme of your book.
Yeah.
The idea being that poor people around the world are not necessarily just problems to solve, but opportunities for business people who want to build their businesses.
Absolutely.
How is this bottom of the pyramid market evolving in Africa?
I think there are probably three main points to think about here. I think the first one is that we need to stop thinking about the base of the pyramid as a static market for everyone to go and tap into. We also have to think about ways in which we can empower the citizens that live within those conditions to do better for themselves, because everything else being equal, the better they do for themselves, the more they will represent by way of an opportunity. The second thing is that the image that we have of Africa as really being a zone where there are only problems, to me is at best wanting. I think, as you said earlier, it's nice to see the economists talking about Africa rising. I mean, about 10 years ago in 2000, they had a cover that said the hopeless continent. So I'm glad that they were able to edit it. But I think that the West has to realize that it's very difficult for a region to pretend to be a locomotive and to travel half the speed of the carts that it's supposed to pull. What I mean by that is when you look at places in the world today where there is growth, Africa comes first. So it's extremely important for any business leader or for any investor that is looking to really thrive over the next generation or so to make sure that they have a very clear strategy for Africa. And they have to think of Africa really as it relates to all the opportunities that are there. And finally, to go back to the question that you were asking, I really believe that what is really amazing about the base of the pyramid in Africa is the amount of growth that you've seen in different sectors. Let me give you a few statistics to illustrate that point. If you look at the cell phone sectors, we've gone from about 9 million people with cell phones in 1997 to about 400 million today. If you look at a statistic like that, it tells you how much growth there is. If you look at a company like Safaricom, which has the mobile money platform called M-Pesa, they had 900,000 subscribers back in 2007. As of last year, 2010, that number had gone to almost 12 million. And these are only a few of the places where you see opportunities, but I could really name, opportunities in agriculture, infrastructure. If you look at Africa, you will have about 30 cities where the total spending power is going to be about 1.6 trillion. These are all opportunities that most of the business leaders operating in the US or in Europe are not thinking about. And this is really why I thought the book was important in giving them a map for them to really access those markets. Because I think, economists often give you compasses, but if you have a compass and you don't have a map, it's very difficult to find your way around.
So a very critical part of your map is a component or a core concept in your book that you call the survival trap.
Yes.
Can you explain what exactly the survival trap is and how is it holding Africa back?
Let me give you an example. Have you really had a day when nothing works? When you wake up in the day and
lots of days like that.
Lots of days like that. How does it feel?
awful.
Awful, right? Imagine if it were 2 days like that in a row. What if it were a week? What if it were a month? I think the survival trap is really this idea that when you operate in markets like Africa, there are so many challenges on a day-to-day basis that it becomes very difficult to see beyond those challenges towards the opportunities that are there. And as a result, people develop a reactive mindset where they think about ways to alleviate the pain as opposed to harvesting growth. And as a result, they get stuck in this vicious cycle. So the survival trap is really about making sure that we recognize that the cycle is there. And the most powerful part of the trap, in my experience, is not the part that we can see. It's not the fact that the phone line doesn't work. It's not the fact that the roads don't work well. Where it really hurts us is in the mindsets that we develop. We stop trusting other people. We start thinking in a zero-sum mindset, which means I'm thinking if the investor is getting, $100, I must be losing $100. It starts, having an impact on people thinking in a very short-term manner. People start being defensive. These are all mindsets which are very important for anybody that is trying to access, base of the pyramid markets, not only in Africa but beyond Africa, to think about.
I wonder if we can spend a little more time on this issue of mindsets and mental models, which you devote a lot of time in your book on that. I agree with you entirely. That's very, very important. What reinforces these mindsets and mental models, and more importantly, how can they be addressed?
What reinforces this mindset is really the challenges that are in the environment. So the more we face problems, the more likely we have to kind of go back into those same cycles. So the way it works, and this is something that I really describe in the book, is that the operating reality has so many challenges that is going to shape the way we view the world and the maps that we use to navigate the world, which are our mental models. And as a result, we are going to take certain actions which will fail to give us the results that we are really looking for, which means that the environment will stay the same and it will go on and on again. And to escape it, I really believe that it's important for business leaders to first realize that those mindsets have an impact on business performance. I mean, they have an impact on profits, on market share, on ability to sign a contract. I mean, something that looks like the best of deals can become your worst ordeal, just because you haven't been able to appreciate the importance of those mindsets. And to me, that's something that's critical. Now, to escape the survival trap, we have to begin with having a very clear vision. And again, Rwanda is a very good example of a nation that was able to have a vision. And all the entrepreneurs which I mentioned in the book, I think one of the cross-cutting themes they have is this laser focus on the vision, where they look very, very hard at what they're trying to achieve. And once we have that vision in place, start thinking about some of the mindsets that we must diagnose and, if you will, disarm in order to actually move forward, while at the same time trying to reinforce the mindsets that help us.
Now, in addition to, you mentioned Rwanda and how Rwanda has tried to escape the survival trap.
Yeah.
In addition to Rwanda, are there other African nations that are also trying to escape it? And how successful have their efforts been?
I think that if you look at the continent today, I think there are a number of nations that are trying to escape the trap. But I think the most exciting stories, at least in my opinion, are not the countries. I think it is the entrepreneurs. I think there is really a sort of a new class of entrepreneurs that is emerging on the continent. Again, the Economist article mentions Mr. Aliko Dangote, who is worth, I think, $13.5 billion, according to The Economist, making him the richest black person. But I think above and beyond billionaires like that, you have day-to-day entrepreneurs who are starting a business, and out of that business realizing not only their dreams, but creating jobs for others and having impact. And to me, that's really something that we have to appreciate when we think of the base of the pyramid in Africa, which is not being looked at enough. So for me, the most exciting stories are stories like that of real entrepreneurs who are starting a business and doing well. And it is also stories of corporations such as Walmart, Coca-Cola, etc., going onto the African continent because they realize the potential that Africa has and managing somehow to make it a very, very big part of the bottom line.
One of the things I found most fascinating about your book is the vignettes of different entrepreneurs that you mentioned.
Yeah.
For our audience, can you give us examples of two or maybe three of such most interesting entrepreneurs? And
Wow, I
what can
think
entrepreneurs around the world learn from them?
you basically give me I guess a big challenge, because which one of the three should I really pick here? When in
Anyone
fact
you like.
I could have profiled like 100 of them. Let me maybe give you a couple of examples. One example that I find particularly inspiring is that of a woman called Eva Moraya. Eva is actually the founder and CEO of a company called Brand Strategy Limited in Kenya. She's also the founder and CEO of another company called Color Creations. Eva was trained as a journalist. Her husband was the entrepreneur. Unfortunately, her husband passed away in a car accident. Overnight, she was left with nothing. And when everybody else would have thought, let me go and look for a secure job to take care of my kids, she actually left the job that she had and invested everything that she had into a business. And what is really unique about the story of this woman is really her ability in an environment which was set against her. Like, one of the things in Kenya back in the days was that the laws made it very difficult for a woman to inherit her husband's asset. Above and beyond all those challenges, lack of finance, etc., you name it, she's managed to really build some very strong businesses. But what is even more important is how much she has invested in trying to train and shape the next generation of entrepreneurs. She's been recognized, with many awards. And to me, she's the kind of person that really finds ways to go beyond their own challenges, but above and beyond that is also able, I would say, to create opportunities and do business in a way where everybody can benefit. So I think that, to me, is a compelling story. Another one is an Ivorian entrepreneur, Mr. Jean Diago. Back in 2008, right when AIG, received a massive bailout out of your taxpayers' money, Jean Diago actually managed to raise about 35 million euros, which is about $50 million, from a venture capital fund called ECP. And he actually managed to do this because he had built an insurance business which was based on integrity. While the firm was still private, he decided that he was going to make his financial statements public. And he decided that they were going to make sure that every time somebody had a claim, they would fulfill the claim very quickly. He's managed to expand to more than 10 countries. How? Because everywhere he goes, he will find a partner, give them equity into the business, because he understands that they understand the environment very well. And this is something that may sound normal to most people, but in environments where level of trust is very low, most people want to do business just within a very close circle. So these are, a different way of looking at opportunities, a different way of thinking about a business, which today has really allowed him to build a business with over $100 million in revenues, And this is somebody that started his career as an entrepreneur at the ripe age of 47 years old. I think, I could go on and give you, thousands of stories like that. And to me, those are the stories that we have to think about, because, again, as we look at the challenges that the West is facing, I believe that Africa and other BoP markets have a very big role to play, and they can only play this role if indigenous entrepreneurs do also extremely well and are able to grow strong businesses.
Now, in your book, you refer to something you call the DARE process.
Yes.
What exactly is that, and how can that be used to uncover opportunities in bottom of the pyramid markets?
So the DARE process is about being able to really diagnose what are the mindsets which are impacting our business, and then, depending on what we find, we then decide what to do with them. So there are some that we must reinforce, there are some that we must emphasize, others that we must basically find a way to remove completely from the firm. It's a process that requires that the business leader is actually able to work with all the stakeholders and try and understand how they are seeing the challenges that the firm is facing and what the problems are. It's actually a process that I've seen a number of business people on the ground use with quite a bit of success, and I would really invite the readers to go to the chapters and get the secret for themselves.
You also write about something you call the Archimedean mindset.
Yes.
What is that, and why does it matter?
The Archimedean mindset is about making sure that we really create businesses where moral purpose and profit motive are really balanced. I think Archimedes told us way back when, 200 before Christ, that if we gave him a fulcrum and a lever that was long enough, he could single-handedly lift the world. Well, today we're in a position where business people have all the tools, the innovativeness, the passion and the drive to lift themselves and the rest of society out of poverty. But it will require that they have a different set of values and mindsets. And as a matter of fact, most of the entrepreneurs that I'm profiled in the book are entrepreneurs that I believe show this compassion and this ability to really drive for profits and generate returns which are very, very high, while at the same time being able to demonstrate moral purpose in the way they conduct their business.
Now, how can Africa build the kind of ecosystems that are required to generate prosperity for entrepreneurs and the people at large? And who should take the lead on this?
I think it's a very good question because there are a number of efforts that exist out there. I mean, you think of all the indices, whether it is the doing business, the corruption index, etc. These are all tools which are used to think about ways in which we can have better ecosystems. I think what we often neglect and what most of those indices don't capture are the intangibles, because I think that's really where things get difficult. Let me give you an example. Africa is one of the environments where it is very, very difficult to fail. So as a business person, God forbid you go bankrupt, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to actually get another round of financing to start your next venture. Because even when you haven't, gotten bankrupt, it's difficult to even get money to begin with. I believe that it's really important that we develop the kind of culture where we have reverence for failure. What I mean by that is we realize that actually failure can be an opportunity to learn, and failure is not necessarily a sort of I guess something that is ingrained in somebody. It's just an experience which is a combination of what happens in the environment. So I really believe that one of the places where we can develop a better ecosystem is if we begin to appreciate the role that failure can play. The second point that I would really look into is also our understanding of what really being an entrepreneur is. In Africa, it's often very difficult for people to tell their parents or to tell their friends and family that they want to be entrepreneurs. Often the entrepreneurship is perceived as the thing that you do when you can go to school, when you can work in government, when you can get into the army. Yet we need entrepreneurs because they are the ones that drive the productivity of a society. So I really believe that it's really important that we create a kind of ecosystem where being an entrepreneur is at least as prestigious and as interesting as doing some other things. And I think this is where having the role models is a very, very important and powerful element. And then finally, I think there is a lot that governments and development partners must do in creating an environment, where the basics are there. For example, out of the 54 countries that you have in Africa today, 38 of them since the 60s have had some sort of a conflict. And most of those conflicts would be intra-country conflicts where the economy is going to shrink by 14%. But most importantly, you're going to pitch different part of the society against the other part. So I think that really creates the kind of environment where it's difficult afterwards to do business. I think these are some of the things that can be considered to make the ecosystem better.
What should Africa mean to corporate leaders today?
Well, Africa should mean growth. Africa should mean growth. I mean, if anyone that is serious about growth has to think about Africa. I mean, because as you look at the statistics, if you look at the articles that The Economist wrote this week, if you read reports such as, Lands on the Move from the McKinsey Institute, there are a number of publications, even books like Africa Rising by Professor Mahajan, published by Wharton School Publishing. These are all, books and resources which show that clearly being serious about growth requires that one thinks about Africa. And I really think that once they've decided that the compass as a business must point towards Africa, what they will need is a map for them to realize the potential of Africa. And I hope that my book can be that map to help them navigate what's required to turn the opportunities that are there into real profits.
So, Eric, let me ask one final question.
Thank you.
If Africa's business and political leaders were to come to you and ask your advice on how they can keep Africa rising, what would you tell them?
I would tell them work on the software.
What does that mean?
That means work on the mindsets that are there. Make sure that you build trust. Make sure that people start, being more comfortable with risk. Make sure that people think long term. Make sure that we stop being defensive. Make sure that we really realize that we can work together and grow something. And I think for them to really work on those mindsets effectively, they must go beyond just telling people what to do. They must then take the reforms that are required to change the environment where all those mindsets get the basis from.
Eric, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
You are most welcome. Thank you.